thing becoming a thing. We're going to say thing so many times in this video, aren't we?
It's going to lose all meaning.
Thing being a thing is a new thing. God damn, I hate that sentence. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the As Yet Unnamed podcast. I am Swaku, and with me today are my co-hosts John.
Hello.
And Aaron.
Hello.
Yeah, we promoted Aaron from special guest to co-host.
What? Promotion.
So before we actually start the actual podcast, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can help the channel by liking and commenting and by subscribing. It all helps the algorithm, and it'll also help if you just let the video run to the end. Leave us on mute if you need to. Apparently watch time counts. But anyway, so John, what are we talking about today?
Yeah, so this topic today came about a couple weeks ago. We were having a chat, spitballing some ideas as we do. And I was getting real deep into the jank tank, looking for some unique ideas. And I was going through the TWDs and looked at a Samedi deck in particular. I think it was run by Ben Peel. But essentially, it had pretty much zero reactions and relied upon Off-Kilter, Little Mountain Cemetery, and Dark Mirror of the Mind to keep alive. And I was wondering, does that still work today? And I guess that's the kind of the root of the topic that we're going through today is how much has the game changed since V5 came about? Are, I guess, older decks still valid? Have some fallen off the map? And what's changed really?
Yeah, and I think the playstyle might have changed as well. Decks aside, like what you were saying, certain decks might or might not still work in the current environment. But I think certain playstyles, certain concept that you build a deck around might have changed a little bit as well, I think. So, do any of you feel like the decks that you created before, I guess we call it the break, did you feel like the decks you created before the breaks was struggling after V5 started?
I guess the initial thought is yes. I look back, I have those decks, I pull them out from before times and think, okay, I've got to make some pretty significant changes. Maybe be a bit more defensive, protect myself, but still go forward, maybe even more forward than before. So yeah, I feel like it's definitely the game's sped up. There are a lot more multiple moving parts in single cards. And the general lack of people playing Sabat meant I had to change my black hand decks significantly.
Sure.
The things I like to play. So, yeah.
So I had a look at my stock of decks, and I think there's only one which is largely intact from before V5, and that was the Adana multiple master phase actions, Vampires with plus bleed and Polarity and Protean, which has actually gotten better since some of the new cards came out, so there's that. Aside from that, I had a Ventrue Grinder, which has gone through significant changes. It's still a grinder, but it's not Ventrue anymore. I had a Demetra deck, which transformed into a Dancer deck. I have Kindred Spirits kicking around. I still like where it's at, but it's waiting for that upgrade just around the corner. So it's kind of in cold storage at the moment.
Yeah, so that's an interesting way to look at it. So I have limited storage space for cards. That kind of does means that I can only float a certain amount of decks at any one point in time. And as sort of prep for this particular podcast, I've gone through and looked at all the decks that I've got. And you're right, a lot of the decks that I built that I thought were working pretty well before V5 started are now either completely gone, like I've taken them apart and built something else instead, or it's like if you have to squint really hard to continue to insist that those are the same decks.
Yeah.
Although interestingly, and Erin has the unfortunate opportunity to experience it firsthand. One of my more successful decks clearly just ignores anything that's V5 and beyond. And I might come back to that in a bit, because I think the whole reason why that particular deck still works in V5 is also the reason why V5 feels different. But I'm going to make you watch. I'm going to make you listen to the end of the podcast to talk about it. So yeah, stick around.
All right.
The other interesting thing I found, and this is something that John noticed as well when I was putting my notes together, is that I don't think the V5 Camarilla starter set really shook the game too much. They were pretty much within the confines or the paradigm of what we come to understand VtES to be for like 20 something years, right? And then I've only really noticed the change after the first wave of the Anarch precons. So that was, I mean, not all of them were Anarch, but I'll just call it Anarch precons for convenience. So it was when Bruja, Ministry, and Banu Hakim came out. And I think that was when...
Gangrel.
Oh yeah, and Gangrel. We don't talk about Gangrel. Shh. Yeah. So that's kind of where things started to feel a little bit different. Is that something that you guys have noticed as well, or?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was just thinking V5 Camarilla felt like a pretty soft landing, if you will. Like, just let's kind of test the water a little bit. And then after that, definitely from Anarch deck releases, the things definitely started to shift quite a bit. And not necessarily, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but there was definitely a noticeable shift.
So I was one of the guys with Doom saying when V5 Cami dropped, and it's quite amusing looking back at it now. But I remember seeing so many princes with Obfuscate and Dominate and thinking, this is just the new meta now. Everyone's just going to have Dominate, Obfuscate, and Second Tradition.
Really didn't happen.
And and then it turns out everyone just had Dominate and Protean and Organized Resistance.
Let's put a pin in Organized Resistance for a bit.
And we put a pin in Korean as well.
We all need a lovely scapegoat, right? I kind of feel like Organized Resistance and probably Bait and Switch would come up a lot today. But was it anything that you've noticed that was different? Like, was ousting harder? Because I think Erin mentioned slightly earlier that surviving was a little bit harder.
Probably, yeah. Well, slightly, I would think. There was a long gap for me between in those break of years as well where I didn't play at all. So part of that maybe getting back into the game and kind of finding those muscles again.
Was there like a huge shock to the system when you came back and there was all these new cards and new effects?
I think it was pretty exciting. Like it was exciting that things were happening again, to be able to actually get a table together. I guess, yeah, for me, it was like I didn't have contact with anybody else who knew the game. So, yeah, it was sort of like a soft, a bit of a find your feet kind of situation and go, oh, yeah, this is like, I remember how to do this now. And I don't throw anything out, and I would give all my storage to cards if I could.
So I know you said not to talk about Organized Resistance, but I'm going to talk about Organized.
I didn't say we shouldn't talk about Organized Resistance. I said put a pin on it. Feel free to pull the pin out, wave it around.
All right, here it goes. So it's a good card.
No shit.
Surprise!
And it is the backbone of a lot of decks. Incidentally, that means there's going to be more titles on the table than there ever was pre-V5. When I say that, I mean across differing players, right? Now it's like everyone's got 2, 3, 4 votes. It's quite unlikely that there's like more than one person without any votes.
Mm-hmm.
Am I wrong?
No, you're not.
No, no.
And that's very different from pre-V5. In pre-V5, the big boogeymen were Camarilla princes. That's what I remember thinking all the time. It's like, oh man, Cami princes are the ones to beat. They had second traditions, they had parity shifts before it got changed, and more often than not, they were also voter capping because they didn't have to contest votes a whole lot unless they were unfortunate with table seating. And I think the absence of that kind of sheer bloat ability in parity shifting for 3 or 4 or 5, then also voter capping on top of that, that allowed Stealth Bleed to be more capable of taking out their prey because they're not going to hit a speed bump like that. The other side of it is, at least with second edition Majesty, which is what you always used to see, right? Second edition Majesty.
Yep.
At least you were knocking off 2 blood from the blocking vamp. They had to pay a blood for second traditions and then Majesty for 1 more. Nowadays, you organize resistance and then you earth meld for very much the same effect, but none of the cost.
I think one of the interesting things is that even though parity shift used to be slightly better early game, after the end of V5s, things have become so explosive that you can't. So remember, okay, maybe we didn't see it quite as much, but it used to be a fairly decent tactic to play Secret Horde, put a bunch of pull into it, so that you're low enough pull that you can parity shift your prey, and then parity shift and voter cap. And I think a combination of there being more titles because people want to play organized resistance and bait and switch have created a situation where, so even if you push your votes through, you probably pass by say 1 or 2 and you get maybe 1 or 2 pullback, but then you don't get the blood on your vampire. So you're not in a situation where you can do the Secret Horde thing and then end your turn with a decent pull buffer. The explosiveness of Monkey Ranch and Ministry and Gangrel Anarchs being reasonably small cap, and if they slam a Club Illusion on the turn after you Secret Horde, with some luck, you might just be out. So loading being harder, I think is just part of the reason why surviving feels harder. The other bit is also forward actions is a lot more efficient now.
I'm not sure if efficient is the word I'd use. I would say consistent. With the prevalence of Anarchs and Protean now, there are a number of effects that allow you to play stealth and or intercept in more ways than one, or rather when you don't need them. So I remember pre-V5, that used to be a big part of the game, is that just don't block and they'll jam sooner or later. I don't think that is as legitimate as strategy anymore. Just because you have things like Mind Rift, Form of the Bat, Form of the Serpent or Cobra. I have a list here somewhere. Form of Mist is another one. Paths into Worlds. And even on the other side, Intercept, you've got cards like Guardian Vigil. So
everything's more consistent. Is that what you're trying to say?
Everything's more consistent. I've also noticed that permanent modifiers like a plus bleed on your vamp or Club Illusion or camera phones, those will be much more preferred over something like a Govern, in my opinion.
Interesting.
I guess on the flip side of that, if you're up against one of those decks that has your deep ecologies or organized resistance, things like that, that are regularly looking to stop you from equipping those items that give you extra bleed, you're more incentivized to just ditch anything that's undirected and try to go forward because, you just know that you're not going to get those things into play because there's just going to be this constant stream of intercept where your predator's stopping you from building up your base, essentially.
That's very interesting coming from someone who, up to recently, been fairly successfully piloting a deck that does a lot of undirected actions and with free unlocks and free equips.
Sure.
Maybe it's
But
the
that was
fact
last
that you've
year,
been
right?
playing that you kind of feel that struggle. It's actually a thought that just crossed my mind today that there's a lot of decks which do those kind of tech up kind of actions and just hope that their predator's too busy to do anything. Thing's the big one. Equips, superior governs, things like that. They've always been around. I just feel like more than ever, and maybe it's not so much to do with V5 and just my state as a player. I feel like, how do I say it?
With words.
The game's now kind of has two phases where the early game is you're teching up, you're governing, you're building up your vamp board. And then the late game is when you slap down your Club Illusion or Week of Nightmares or whatever it is and start trying to oust.
That just now got me thinking. Remember when we used to look at cards like Thing, Reunion Kamut, Kim's Law Leadership, and even whichever the tradition it is that puts blood, that pretends to be half a govern?
Mm-hmm.
Remember we used to look at all of these and we were like, oh yeah, but if your fam can play govern or, enchant kindred, why are you prepping with cards like this?
I love getting the band back together.
But yeah, it's not a card people commonly play in the sense of, you look at it and it's like, oh, this is a great card. There's always been this idea that, it does one thing, it doesn't actually move your game plan forward. It maybe accelerates a vampire or something, but it doesn't cause pool loss. It doesn't necessarily put you in a better position.
Yeah. Whereas I guess now you got the cards that will bleed forward and add blood to one of your uncontrolled minions in the same action. So, I mean, it might not be a thing, like it might not be 2 blood, but at least it's forward movement and also kind of building you up faster as well.
Yeah, but also Thing becoming a thing. We're going to say thing so many times in this video, aren't we?
It's going to lose all meaning.
Thing being a thing is a new thing. God damn, I hate that sentence. And I think, oh my god, and I honestly think this has got something to do with how the games become faster, because with the Gangrel and Ministry Anarch decks and Bruja as well, to a certain extent, they're all significantly younger, right? You look at the Anarch crypt and you go like, oh my god, 8, that is really high cap. But 8 is, it used to be 8 is a prince. It's not a high cap, it's just an average prince.
Yeah.
And when your crypt is 4, 5, 6, and then the occasional 7 or 8, you get more action economy to, take time off to do thing. And I feel like that is maybe part of what's changed as well. The whole idea of everything being faster might be partially, like you said just now, Aaron, where we've got a lot more cards that either do multiple things as options or multiple things at the same time.
Yep.
Looking at Break the Bonds or Platinum Protocol, but also because the effective vampires are much younger.
And for those cards, they can be younger because they don't need the superior version of any of those disciplines to use the cards.
That's a good point. Maybe it's because I really like high capacity vampires. I never considered the fact that there could be inferior disciplines.
So to circle back to, I guess, your original question, is ousting harder or easier?
I think it's easier to oust someone it is not necessarily easier to oust your prey.
Yeah. Yeah, spying mission's a thing. People forget.
Well, there's no spying mission in Protean.
I guess. Oh, and like you do have to have superior obfuscate too.
Yeah, who's got time for that?
Right?
The number of times that you set a table and immediately you can tell one person that you're screwed, you're the end of the bounce chain. That wasn't as prevalent before V5. For V5, you might, your prey might be able to redirect bleeds and then your grand prey is screwed. But it's not like, your bleed's going to go around the table and definitely land at someone's feet.
So I have a question.
Yes.
It just occurred to me because we were saying before that there's cards that do multiple things. So bleeding forward, adding blood down onto your uncontrolled, for example. Is that then potentially creating more space in a deck to allow you to then add more things like bounce cards or organized resistances or that kind of defensive mechanism as well as going forward? Is it allowing you to have both? Where before you kind of had to pick either one or the other.
I don't think of it so much in the mindset of like, what can I fit into a deck? My thought is more around how effective can a single action be, right? And if the baseline is a govern bleed for 3 or a bloat for 3, then you consider, okay, what if it's a glove bleed for 3 and a bloat for 2? If that card existed in pre-V5, it would be crazy. But there you go. Along similar lines, you have Camarill's Iron Fist. It's how many? 5 points, and someone gains a pool.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Also pretty good. And whoever thought princes would one day get something on the level of Reckless Agitation? But here we are, and it's a little uninspiring.
Wow.
I'm going to play the devil's advocate here a little bit.
Go ahead.
I would like to point out that pre-errata Parity Shift was Camera Iron Fist on steroids.
Well, it had its restrictions, right? It had the capacity, but unless you were in a bad state, you couldn't oust with it.
You say that.
Oh, you secret horde down to 4 and
parity
shift to 5 or something stupid like that.
Or, you have to be able to play out your excess Zilla's Valley somehow. So, yeah.
Sure.
But I think specifically Camarilla's Iron Fist, I don't think it's really that much difference in terms of forward movement compared to old Parity Shift. But I think you've got something there because it is the old Parity Shift did not take 5 counters off the table. It did not take 5 beats off the table. It moved the 5 beats around. Yeah, so I think that's probably the difference there. Making beats disappear is, I don't think the word's easier, but it's close to easier. And the upcoming Sabbat expansions got a couple more cards that move beats off the table at a fairly decent clip.
Yep.
So, what's the conclusion here? Ousting isn't technically harder. Surviving isn't necessarily harder, but it also feels like ousting is harder and surviving is harder.
But I think you're along the right lines. Like, there's more bead removal these days than ever, and as a consequence of organized resistance, there's also less bloat than ever, right?
Mm-hmm.
The big offender that's still bloat, making games last longer or, keeping games go to timeout is basically Montreal, right?
Yep.
You're not having voter cap decks just dirtle until timeout like you used to.
I see Aaron staring at me and laughing.
there was a raised eyebrow there. I was like, really?
Yeah, so with everything that's changed, and we've all sort of said that we've all had old decks that we had to take apart because, or significantly change. What is there a particular concept or a particular sort of thing that just simply doesn't work anymore? Like something that used to work before V5 and then now, you know, in 2025, it doesn't work anymore. And I have a little note here that says Erin would like to fat shame some high cap vampires.
Well, there wasn't any one deck in particular, but yeah, like higher capacity vampires where you're slow at the beginning of the game and then potentially speeding up mid game are just too slow at the beginning to get anywhere. And maybe I'm just playing the wrong fat vampires, but that's part of my experience. Yours may differ.
Along similar lines, one vampire in particular comes to mind, and that's the Unnamed. It used to be if the Unnamed could bleed for 3, gain 2, and then Enkulkog bleed for 3, gain 2, or maybe even 6. That used to be enough.
Yep.
Back then, Flick also was not as prevalent, so if they were lucky enough to get a prey that couldn't flick, you'd be in a good spot. But I've not seen the Unnamed go very well recently. Like, I've certainly seen him around, but he's never been like a table threat like he used to be.
Is that true then for all bad vampires, or is that only specific high capacity vampires? Because we have had in recent couple of releases a fair number of high capacity vampires with, I guess, specials that are good enough that they might be able to stand on their own? Or do you think that even someone like Diana, for example, might not be, the her discipline spread and her ability is still no longer enough?
Diana's the 9, right?
So 9's not fat, 9's just big bone, and then 10's are fat. 10's are fat? Is that what you're saying?
I think that is what I'm saying. But also the fact that she has fortitude. And fortitude is a big part of allowing your big cat vamps to make their worth, right?
Yeah.
I think what we're saying is they have to be able to take multiple actions then, and rather than relying on getting that ankle cog to bleed in someone else's turn like the Unnamed. They really have to pull their weight once they arrive on the table.
So this is kind of relating to what I mentioned earlier about permanent effects. I think there's a threshold where I can take, let's say, 3 or 4 incoming pool damage, and I have a way to deal with it, whether it's bleed reduction or a flick, or maybe I simply just bloat. And so if you're not crossing that threshold, you're not really accomplishing much.
That threshold is also oddly easy to hit with that particular card that I teased a little earlier, but I'm still not going to name it. Anyway, back to you, John.
I think the game's kind of the meta's kind of restructured in a way that I'm not going to bother pushing that threshold early on. I'm just going to start building out until I can do 6 or 9 pool damage a turn with some kind of consistency.
Yep.
You think you could achieve that with a govern conditioning or 2 governs or whatever, but you're not going to have 2 governs every turn, most likely.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that factor of consistency to it as well, and I think that's a big part of the Gangrel game plan, where they just thing until they have 4 vamps and then they all bleed for 2 or something like that.
When you were saying, you're talking about high capacities and, having a particular threshold of beats lost per turn,
mm-hmm.
or a particular threshold of removing beats from your prey per turn.
Mm-hmm.
It sort of got me thinking. We were saying that high capacity vampires are struggling a bit now because two things, right? So one, it is the game's faster. So if your vampire takes too long to go up, you don't have the action economy. You might be low on pool by the time you even start. And also that a single vampire is significantly less capable of doing 8-9 pool damage by themselves as opposed to 4 different vampires each with Club Illusion. But in V5 we also see a lot less weenie anything. Weenie computer hacking used to be a bit of a boogeyman, weenie votes, but these days you don't really see that either.
So I've certainly seen Weaker Nightmares here and there.
Yep.
I'm personally fond of my Weenie Hakeem's Law deck. There's a couple guys around here that run Weenie Fortitude and Weenie Animalism, and they're certainly a pain to deal with. So I haven't seen what you're talking about.
Weenie Potence seems to run around a bit, or just Weenie in general.
I haven't seen them really work though. Annoying the crap out of your prey and your predator, and then maybe getting a victory point. But game wins, they seem to struggle a lot more these days.
Yeah, I can't say I've been on the table with it recently, but I've seen across the room. So yeah, it'd be interesting to maybe find out why is that struggling then to get VPs.
I think this goes back to what John was talking about earlier with the difference between second tradition into Majesty versus organized resistance into Earthmelt.
I certainly feel like Combat Ends is more... Well, it's always been prevalent. But yeah, Earthmeld in particular and Form of Mist are both very blood effective. I'm wondering if because of the speed of the game, like everyone's bleeding, everyone's removing beads off the table, or rather specifically beads from pool, does it mean that combat is just too slow, and so a lot of decks are getting away with playing Majesties and Form of Mist without having to fear anything more than a Donnybrook?
Combat has always struggled to deal with combat ends because combat ends is just such an efficient answer to combat.
Okay.
In order to deal with a Majesty or an Earthmelt, any combat ends really, you can't just have one card as an answer. Combat does have cards like the Mortal Grapple, Psych, telepathic Tracking, and to an extent, Thoughts Betrayed.
I'm fond of Charismatic Aura as well.
Yeah, that too. But if you think about it, at the end of the day, sure, you grapple, you psych, you've successfully, 1-for-1 the Majesty. But what have you really achieved if then your follow-up is all hands for one? So you essentially need approximately 3 cards to deal with one combat ends. You need the card that actually answers the combat ends, and then you usually need 2 other cards to punish, your opposing minion for only packing combat ends.
Yeah.
And I think with Earthmelt being Earthmelt and Form of Mist being Form of Mist, it's so easy to include Earthmelts and Form of Mist, even as opposed to Majesty, that your combat decks you just don't have enough you don't have enough deck to deal with all of these and still be able to get your game win.
Yeah. Form of Mist in particular is like, it's stealth effectively.
Yeah.
So it's multi-purpose. You can happily squeeze more Form of Mist in than you would Majesty.
I mean, it's not a V5 card, but it does tie back to what Aaron was saying. We're running more and we're seeing more.
I almost would say it's a V5 card.
You would say it's a V5 card?
Because it is, because before V5, the whole Protean package didn't have a payload. So all the clans with Protean were just kind of dirtling.
Yeah.
Now you've got Protean with Dominate, and you kind of always had Protean with Club Illusion, but at least now you don't have to go Anarch, right? Stanislava aside, No one with Protean really had flicks or a payload.
It's fair. So then we've basically sort of identified that the cause was NX out of the gate, more efficient cards. Is that good or bad? Do we blame BCP?
So this is where I might be instead giving props to BCP, because BCPs, they are bound to the lore.
Yep.
So, like it or not, they have to print a clan with Dominate and Protean and what's their other discipline?
There's a third discipline? What?
Animalism.
Animalism? Is it animalism? Yeah, animalism.
Poor old animalism.
Even presence and Protean was a big deal before the Misc came around. In some sense, even if they didn't print new cards, just the Vamps alone would be setting a new power level. So everyone has to step up their game just to deal with Form of Misgovern.
Yep.
So in some sense, it wasn't their choice, but it kind of works out well because it means that we have to buy new cards.
I think that's a very good abridged version of what you mentioned in the Misc Recon breakdown video. If you at home haven't seen it or listened to it, go back, listen to it, or watch it again. And yeah, John does make a pretty good point about how BCP has done reasonably well with their hands tied by the law.
I don't remember any of it.
Yeah, I think they've done well with what they've been given, right? Like, everything's still a lot of fun in that V5. It's a little bit more, of course, a little bit more sped up, but I don't mind that. I don't think we need to stay stagnant at all to try to stay a little bit relevant. If it's going to, and it has brought more people to the game, then it's something right. Tick.
I will say I'd be curious to see if it continues to creep up, or if it kind of stabilize and
A bit of a plateau.
yeah, let's say, okay, this is the V5 power level, and you can just kind of print cards outwards, like, here's a new archetype, which is roughly on the same level as the Misc.
I think we are at a good point right now in the game where the game being faster isn't a bad thing.
Yeah.
The playgroup maybe meets once a week. Some people have to travel an hour and a half to get to wherever the game's happening. You maybe get 2-3 games in if you're lucky. You want to, granted, nobody wants to lose, nobody wants to be ousted, but you also want to come away with like, oh my god, that was an amazing play. That thing happened. This person got ousted out of nowhere, and you come away with stories. Even if you don't share it, it's something that is interesting, is fresh, is exciting. I don't think it'll be a great game if and going back to what you mentioned, what you were saying, Aaron, is like, I don't think we'll get that many new players if the whole experience of the game is you rock up, you look at each other, gain pool for 2 hours, and then at the end of the day, your exciting story is
I lived.
There probably is a point where it becomes too fast, but I don't think we're at that point yet.
I'll be curious to see how Sabat shake that up, and if the game slows down with the rise of combat, if there is a rise of combat.
My prediction is no rise of combat, but let's see what happens.
More votes.
More votes.
Yeah.
Although, with this Sabat expansion, it does mean that it is now reasonably doable to gain 31 pull for a single oust.
Yes. That will be the first mission.
That's the first mission. So let me take that pin out from organized resistance again.
Mm-hmm.
Organized Resistance clearly is one of the meta-defining cards post V5.
Along with bait and switch.
Yeah, along with bait and switch. But are there any meta-defining cards from pre-V5 that have survived V5? I think there is. I'd like to hear your thoughts first.
Dominate.
Someone the master card?
I think, John, you were asking earlier, I think before the podcast, if Legionnaire would still be OP in the current meta, assuming no errata, right?
Yeah. Assuming the errata was rolled back and we got it in its original state. Is it still borked in the current meta?
I think potentially, because it gets around Organized Resistance, right?
It's a funny card because I kind of feel like the Aggressive Corpse is a similar kind of boogeyman.
Yeah? What makes you say that?
But you were talking earlier about how to get around combat, and I think a combat card 1-for-1 isn't the best way to go about it. You're going to either want to rush them multiple times until they run out of answers, or block them multiple times until they run out of answers, and eventually you're going to land a blow.
Mm-hmm.
Aggressive Corpse is one way to kind of answer that, and like you say, Legionnaires is a way you can answer bait and switch. One thing that we saw, and I think we might see similar things with Aggressive Corpse, is it becomes a module that you can kind of just tack on to another deck. I will say one of the better answers to Legionnaire was like Ancilla Empowerment and Anarchist Type Rising, right? And maybe you could see like random Barons playing it just in the hopes of the table agreeing to oust the Legionnaire player. I think it might still be a problem, actually. Even with the new power level, it might still be a problem.
I certainly think so.
It was in the game for so long, and
nobody really cared until people cared too much.
Yeah.
So speaking of meta-defining cards pre-V5, I believe a lot of what we feel like it's power creep, or the whole concept of the game becoming faster, is due to one card, and it's Villain. The villain of the game is Villain. And we've got evidence of it with the Goals Find Inner Peace deck, where it just bloats so fast that you really can't do much about it, even though it has multiple 11 cap inner circles. If we didn't have cards now that bled and also did something else, I think the game would still be significantly slower and we'll get more timeout just because of Villain. And while it's slightly better now that it's errata, it's still the key sort of card that, makes the game slower than it could potentially be. And I do, to a certain extent, believe that the so-called power creep, or honestly, I don't even think it's a power creep, I just think it's an increase in how fast the game is mainly due to, you would go through rounds of playtesting and then people would just realize that, if I pack 6 villains and maybe a couple of Golcondas, if the new cards weren't as explosive or the new decks didn't have any explosive options, they just didn't get anywhere. And honestly, coming into V5, the boogeyman was Goals Find Inner Peace.
Are they still a boogeyman?
I certainly don't think so, but I might be biased.
I'm just sitting here wondering where we've just said that it's harder and harder to play those chunky vamps. And I'm wondering, without Villain, how you would survive.
I don't think you can. I honestly don't think you can.
So what's the alternative?
For better or worse, Villain just became way too powerful. The pridefulness of Villain just pushed it over the top so much over minion tap, because you can get away with running a little bit more even if you're not running multiple master phase actions, because it's a trifle.
I will say that is a good way to ruin someone's game by suddening their villain.
Yes.
And it happens more and more and more. in all the games I play. More people are packing Sardins, Washers, and Villain's the one people go nuts.
Yep. No, and the other thing is something that you told me a while ago is you can't win a game on 2 vamps anymore.
Yeah.
And if you're playing like 8 caps or higher, you're going to need to villain your vamps. Otherwise, you're looking at, 30 pool or so, which is
All your pool.
all your pool. Exactly.
Transferring out.
So, yeah, villain is a big part of enabling the fact that, the ability to play 8 caps and higher at all, I think. Unless they have some weird ability where you effectively villain them, like Io, Igoli, or Dorlot, or even cards like Greta Kircher or Serena the White, where their blood effectively becomes pool.
And look, even though I put villain up as the villain of both slightly before V5 and right now V5, I don't think it's a bad thing. The existence of villain has given the game more variety.
Yeah.
Because your high capacity vampires have exciting card decks, but without villain, you just can't play them.
Or you might play one and then you'll struggle out to get your second and third vamps out. And I think more than ever, like I mentioned earlier, there's that threshold where you must be doing a certain amount of damage, otherwise it just gets mitigated by a flick or a block or a bloat.
So for better or worse, I think it's a good thing. Maybe accidentally a good thing, but it's a good thing nonetheless. I have on my notes here that says John has a point, maybe. I don't know if you still remember what the point was.
I think it's a point I've been kind of hammering on across the whole discussion, in that the game now is more about building up your engine and then starting to roll it forward. I don't feel like that was so much the case in pre-V5. I think everyone's teching now to have a resilience towards that engine, and I think many of the, reaction packages and or payloads that you used to see in those older decks, they don't reach that threshold, and I think a large swath of them are not going to be effective in the current metagame.
I think that pretty much sums up what we've been saying.
Maybe it might be worth, pointing at what decks are still relevant from before V5.
I think those are somewhat still relevant. Not much else comes to mind. Kindred Spirits Bleed is still decent.
Kindred Spirits Bleed, Clown Car.
Yeah.
Maybe.
But Clown Car's got a new flavor, so it's kind of hard to say whether the old flavor of Clown Car still works.
Palo Grande? I think it's still got game.
Well, if you at home think Palo Grande still got game, let us know in the comments below.
I think it will definitely have game once the Sabat release comes around.
Yeah, the Sabat one will be Sabat will be an interesting add-on to whatever we've got now.
I'll be pulling out those Black Hand again. Soon. The Council of Seraphim is coming back.
That whole rule of older Sabat can burn a blood to follow a path really does open up a lot more options for older Sabat decks that might have been struggling a little bit.
Yeah, it's really an ingenious way to keep the old crypts alive.
Yeah. Cool. So with that, let's just come to the end of the podcast, come to the end of today's episode. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Thank you, Erin.
Thanks.
And we hope that you at home have found this particular episode helpful. If you think we've missed anything, or if there's anything you'd like to see, that you'd like us to talk about, let us know in the comments. And until next time, see ya.
Bye-bye.
See ya.